All right, let's talk a little bit about calculating the unemployment rate. Now, unemployment rate may seem pretty straightforward. It's just like, hey, it's the percent of people who are unemployed. Well, that's not quite true. Um, we're going to need to refine our definition a little bit, and even then, we're going to have to dig a little deeper to figure out how we're calculating this thing. So the unemployment rate is actually the percent of the labor force that is unemployed. Okay, well, we got to be careful here about what we mean by labor force and what do we mean by unemployed. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to break down our population into kind of categories. This is kind of what the Bureau of Labor Statistics does before it can calculate the unemployment rate. Okay, so first of all, we've got everybody. Everyone in the population that you're looking at. For us, usually that's going to be the US. But you can also do unemployment rate for more local, like state or city level. So we've got our working age population, which I believe is 15 to 65. I'll double check that later. But and then we've got our kids and our elderly over here. So we're not really expecting them to be working. We do expect people in this category potentially to be working. Now, within this working age population, there are some people who are either looking to work or who are actually working. And then you've got other folks who are considered not in the labor force. They can be disabled folks, they can be stay-at-home mom and dads, they can be full-time students. Okay, regardless, they are working age, but they're not seeking work at this time. Okay. So we've got our not looking, we've got our disabled, but the people who are looking to work are called our labor force. Okay. So when I talk about the labor force, those are working age people who are looking to work. Okay. Now within those who are looking to work, we have the people who actually found it. Okay. The employed. And then finally we get to the unemployed. Okay. Now we have to be careful because it's not everyone who doesn't have a job. So when I say unemployed, kids, elderly, they don't have jobs. The folks who aren't looking, who are disabled, they don't have jobs. They are not counted as unemployed, which is going to be very important later. Okay? So it's people who are actively looking for work who can't find it. Okay? So real quick, let's actually calculate the unemployment rate. So let's say your labor force, need a better marker. So let's say our labor force is, I don't know, 25 million, and unemployed, we have 2 million. To find the percent of unemployed people, we just take our unemployed divided by labor force times 100%. Okay, so in this case, this would be an unemployment rate of around 4%. Okay, 8%. So doing the calculation is easy once you know which numbers to do. Again, it's just unemployed divided by the number who are in the labor force. Okay. The other number that comes up that is important is something called the labor force participation rate. Okay. Labor force, I'll write the whole thing out. So labor force participation rate. Now, here's why this is important. You would think that whenever the unemployment rate goes down, then that's a good thing. Okay? Of course, hey, if the unemployment rate goes down, that's good news, right? Well, the answer is usually. Usually the unemployment rate going down is a good thing. But there's a problem called discouraged workers. So let's go back to how we calculated the unemployment rate over labor force. Okay, so occasionally what happens is we have something called a discouraged worker. Now, what a discouraged worker is it's someone who's been looking for work, looking for work, looking for work, and suddenly they decide, you know what, I'm done. Okay, I'm gonna go back to school, or hey, I'm done. I'm gonna retire. Um, so if this is the case, then we lose people in the unemployed category, and we also lose people in the labor force category. Okay, but because of the way that the math works, okay, let's say just for fun, we had 2/5. Okay, that's like 40%. Okay, and let's say we lose one from our unemployed and one from our labor force. So our unemployment rate drops from 40% to 25%. But this doesn't mean that the job market has gotten any better. It's just someone who has given up. So they are no longer in the labor force and they are no longer considered unemployed. Um, but it's not a good signal for the job market. But we would be able to detect this happening if we look at how many people are in the labor force. Okay, so here's how we tell how many people are in the labor force. We do labor force divided by working age population. So remember before we had this category right before labor force where we've got our whole population, we've got our working age people, and then below that, the ones who out of here are looking for work, we call that the labor force. So unemployment rate was this out of this. Labor force participation rate was this out of this. Okay, so let's take a look. So let's say our labor force is, I don't know, before we said it was 25 million. And let's say our working age population is, I don't know, let's say 40 million. So if we want to find that population, we're going to divide here and multiply by 100% to turn it into a percentage. So I don't know, this is 5 out of 8. So this would be 63%, give or take, after we multiply by 100%. So what labor force participation rate does for us, the reason that we do it, is if we see the unemployment rate going down, we know, hey, that's a good thing, unless labor force participation is also going down. So earlier, when we talked about discouraged workers, if there are discouraged workers, we'll see this labor force participation rate dropping. So that's kind of a hint of like, hey, we should look at, we should see, hey, are there a bunch of discouraged workers? So we've got unemployment rate, we've got labor force participation rate. I'm not going to talk about every single possible measure, but there are different ways of measuring unemployment. One thing that they do sometimes is they look for people who are underemployed, people who are part-time who want to be full-time, and different stuff like that. So there's kind of different degrees of unemployed. But this one, the unemployment rate we typically look at is really people who haven't been able to find work at all. Okay, so this is how you calculate that. Good luck.